Hello, online arts community. Welcome to Fleetwood-Jourdain Theater's Stay Creative in collaboration with Piven Theater Workshop, a journey through the history of Black theater, a series with me, Professor Bria Walker. Today, we will talk about minstrelsy, its origin, and the impact it has had on American theater and culture. Minstrelsy was a comedic American theatrical art form popular from the early 19th to the early 20th century. It reached its peak between 1850 and 1870. Minstrelsy was originally performed by white male minstrels, usually in blackface, who presented songs, dances, and jokes that portrayed negative stereotypes of African Americans. Some of these racist archetypes included the happy, frolicking, lazy plantation darkies, and ridiculous, inept, misspeaking urban fools, or zip coons. In order to caricature the singing and dancing style of Black slaves and affect the countenance of these racist archetypes, these white minstrels would speak with over-the-top, ridiculous dialects, move about the stage with exaggerated behavior, overemphasize their lips with red makeup, and would paint their faces pitch black. The black makeup they painted their faces with was made up of either burnt cork or grease paint or even shoe polish. In New York City, Thomas Dartmouth Daddy Rice introduced his Negro impersonation act with the character of Jim Crow. According to historians, Thomas Rice saw a crippled Black stable hand doing a peculiar shuffling, hopping dance. The stable hand's name was Jim Crow, and as he danced, he sang a catchy song with the refrain, "Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow." Rice memorized the stable hand song, copied his hobbling dance, wrote some new verses, and tried out the routine on stage. It was a huge hit. He would name this song and dance routine Jump Jim Crow. This act would prove to be the precursor to minstrelsy. Another one of the first African Americans to be portrayed on stage was Sambo. He was played by a white actor in John Murdoch's The Triumph of Love. Dan Emmett and his Virginia Minstrels, a white quartet, introduced the minstrel show format to the American stage, but it was the Christie Minstrels, who American songwriter Stephen Foster wrote songs for, would prove to be the most influential, as they ran on Broadway for almost 10 years and solidified the format for minstrel shows. The shows happened in two parts. According to Britannica, quote, in part one, the performers were arranged in a semicircle, with the interlocutor in the center, and the endmen, Mr. Tambo, who played the tambourine, and Mr. Bones, who rattled the bones, a pair of clappers, at the ends. The interlocutor, in whiteface, usually wore formal attire. The others, in blackface, wore gaudy, swallow-tailed coats and striped trousers. The program opened with a chorus, often as a grand entrance, and at the conclusion of the song, the interlocutor gave them the command, "Gentlemen, be seated." Then followed a series of jokes between the interlocutor and endmen, interspersed with ballads, comic songs, and instrumental numbers chiefly on the banjo and violin. The second part, or olio, which means mixture or medley, consisted of a series of individual acts that concluded with a hoedown or walk-around in which every member did a specialty number while the others sang and clapped. Occasionally, there was a third part consisting of a farce, burlesque, or comic opera, end quote. Surprisingly, minstrel shows were more popular in the North than in the South, and audiences loved them. According to historian Robert Toll, quote, the audiences were large, boisterous, and hungry for entertainment. They hollered, hissed, cheered, and booed with the intensity and fervor of today's football fans, end quote. Before the Civil War, Blacks were not allowed to perform on stage. They performed as fiddlers at parties, entertainers at restaurants, etc. But after the Civil War, on-stage opportunities began to become more available. But in order to make a living, Black performers often had to act out heartbreaking stereotypes and don blackface because audiences still wanted their same old stereotypes. So, In order to lure white audiences away from white minstrels, Black performers touted themselves as real coons and authentic former slaves. They let audiences know that they weren't the skilled white entertainers acting out white stereotypes of Black life, that they were the real deal. And their tactics worked. In 1865, the Georgia Minstrels became the first African American song and dance company to earn national acclaim. They billed themselves as the only Simon pure Negro troupe in the world, and their act as an authentic portrayal of Black plantation life. In 1865, the Georgia Minstrels became the first African American song and dance company to earn national acclaim. They billed themselves as the only Simon pure Negro troupe in the world, and their act as an authentic portrayal of Black plantation life. Other performers, such as the legendary comedy duo of Burt Williams and George Walker, billed themselves as the real coons. When show business began becoming available to Blacks, it was a large turning point for them. Even though the pay was small, it was still more than they had previously earned. Early jazz performers such as Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong got their start in minstrel shows. Blues singers Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith also got their start in minstrel shows. According to W.C. Handy, composer of St. Louis Blues, who also got his start in minstrelsy, quote, "All the best Black talent of that generation came down the same drain. The composers, the singers, the musicians, the speakers, the stage performers. The minstrel show got them all," end quote. According to Toll, quote, "They had no choice. Because of minstrelsy, then, Black people became part of American show business. Initially, they were limited to stereotype roles and given little credit for their performing skills. But they had a foot in the door and could begin their long struggle to modify and break free of the patterns and images imposed on them by white minstrels," end quote. By the turn of the century, major shifts were happening in American culture. The North and South were beginning to realign, and interest was shifting from minstrelsy's plantation topics to the Industrial Revolution, which was bringing in an influx of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe. Minstrels tried adapting their material to evolve with the times, but their blackface makeup limited the effectiveness for their portrayal of immigrants, and without it, they were no longer recognized as minstrels. Eventually, the minstrel shows slowly disappeared, but elements of it began to show up in vaudeville, radio, and eventually television. Although minstrel shows have faded from professional theaters, its pervasive legacy continues to permeate American culture and can be seen on products and in popular media all over the world today. Characters such as the Mammy can be seen on television and on food. The uncle stereotype is seen every day on packages of rice. The pickaninny is seen in the character of Buckwheat in The Little Rascals. Dandy Jim or Zip Coon is popular in reality TV shows, and Jim Crow in music videos. Spike Lee's 2000 feature film Bamboozled was about a frustrated African-American TV writer who proposes a blackface minstrel show in protest, but to his chagrin, it becomes a hit. Our relationship with these images and stereotypes is just as complicated today as it was in the past. And just like with our past, we must remember it. We have to acknowledge it. We must talk about it, because if we don't, we're doomed to repeat it. And don't forget our call to action. We want to hear how Black theater has impacted your lives. Send us your stories and experiences. Submit your story to fjtheater@cityofevanston.org by 12 p.m. on Friday, April 24th. Please note, by submitting your work, you grant Fleetwood-Jourdain Theater the right to review and share your submission via video and on our social media platforms for the Stay Creative series. We can't wait to hear how Black theater has impacted your lives. Join us next time as we turn another page in the history of Black theater.